Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Jason, and I'm a product manager at Nansen AI. And this presentation is a little bit short, but we'll try to. The primary goal here is to try to ask people, especially all of you who are founders, to think about the way which you grow your users beyond the standard high APY if you're a DeFi project, and or whitelist / market making if you're an NFT project. So the goal here is really to think about what are interesting ways, how do I really find my product market fit, and then how to go after those customers. And then we can take questions, or I can present in both English and Chinese. So we'll go there. All right, I think the first thing I want to talk about, which is in the current environment, as you can see, APY or yields on DeFi is not necessarily higher or lower risk adjusted compared to, say, the US interest rates, right? So what that means is all the strategies that you employ typically during the bull market to attract users might not be as relevant anymore, right? So then what that means is if you're launching your project, right, you're thinking, okay, where do I go? I have one anchor investor, right, who can maybe put in, a few million. How do I go from my few million to, 100 million in TYL, right? So I think that's the first part where you can see the 30-day average APY, especially for some of these higher quality yields, is not that much more different than, say, US Treasury bills. And then I think the second part, which is a very important problem in Web3, is just the complete lack of user loyalty. We see this very often. As soon as a new NFT marketplace is launched, and there's the promise of, say, an airdrop, you just essentially see that all users goes to whatever the protocol. So on the right side, and then I'm using Alberto a lot because he's one of our KOLs, and we give him data. I wish I had more time to do analysis and do research. I don't. So he helps us do a lot of the research. So on the right side, you can see that basically as soon as Uni launched, people directly went to Sushi. This is from earlier in the cycle. And then I think most recently, if you look at Blur versus OpenSea as NFT marketplaces, basically Blur now has something like, I don't know what the latest number is, but like something like 60, 70% of the NFT volume, right? So on the right side, that's the analysis we're trying to get people to think about, which is of the people who are actually using your product or using your competitor's product. And that's the great part about Web3, which is because the data is fully public, you can actually see, what is the composition of your competitor's users? How can you segment them into interesting segments that matters to you? And then basically here do a cluster analysis to say, okay, it looks like in terms of this segment of users, this is the most active, right? So what that means is if I'm going to launch a competitive protocol, do I go after the same segment, or do I go after a segment that's less served by, right? There's no right answer here, but I think the key point is you want to think about that when you're launching, because then you can better target your messaging and you can better target your users. So let's move on to some examples. Okay, so I thought I had a report on this. So basically, you can see that we're essentially going towards a race to the bottom, right? Royalty-free marketplaces, as soon as they launch, zero loyalty from users, it basically takes all the market share. So what that means for you as developers is, you work on 3 months, 6 months to try to launch your project, and then as soon as you launches, somebody forks your code and then takes all your users, right? That's something that I think is, very unfortunate. So so on the right side here, you can see that Blur has taken over half of the market share. And then this is the source. So the first part we want to talk about is community due diligence, right? And this example was an idea that we had with Alberto, which is if you look at an NFT community, right? So imagine you're in an NFT project. You want to launch a collection. And then you say, okay, well, how do I think about my collection vis-a-vis Bored Apes, right? And why does that matter? Well, so for example, if you look at a Bored Ape user, they're more likely to hold maybe 1 or 2 Bored Apes, maybe 1 or 2 Azuki. I actually don't know what the Venn diagram is, and they'll hold a lot of other collections. So then from a brand and from a positioning perspective, where do you want to position your NFT collection vis-a-vis, say, people who at the same time hold a Bored Ape and Azuki, right? And what I mean by that is, say you try to launch it and you say, okay, I want to launch a really exclusive premium collection. Well, if somebody's already holding a Bored Ape, how likely are they to buy that, right? So this is really kind of from the user segmentation and from the user spacing perspective, trying to launch your product and try to fit into who your target market is. And why does that matter, right? Because what you're essentially looking for is, you're looking for a network effect, right? If you can launch an NFT collection targeted towards people who also hold Bored Apes, then essentially next time there's an activity, right? There's either a Azuki activity or there's a Bored Ape activity, then you can basically on that community which is already formed. So it's a lot easier for you to launch your project or to grow your project comparing to, say, starting from 0 and trying to build that entire community. Does that kind of make sense? Why this kind of customer analysis makes sense? Because then it saves you a lot of time, right? So here you can see that if you look at this collection, right, there might be normies, but you actually see it's just very, very few people hold Bored Apes. So then however, they have a very, very large influence. So if you can find what else is in their wallet, and more importantly, what is missing in their wallet, or what is a interesting segment you can target within that, then it might be good. So, and then specifically, I think the part we're trying to help out is look at these people who are sweepers or smart flippers, like, how loyal are they? They're probably the least loyal. So then when you're designing a collection, you can see, okay, this collection, what kind of users are they in there? And whether or not that's the user you want to target, right? I think that's the important part. Yeah, so Bayer has the same audience, right? So no change in collection. The second part is, this is say when you're looking at a new collection, so this is more of from an investor perspective, right? If you're looking for a new collection and you're trying to see like, oh, I see a lot of volume, but then how many traders are there, right? If there's very little number of traders, then the likelihood of this being, let's not say manipulated, but having high volatility with respect to the price is higher than otherwise, I would say. Whereas if you had a collection that had a very high and very healthy set of unique traders, that might be a collection that has better liquidity, that might be a collection that has more interesting community, that might be a collection that's more suited for what you're trying to do. So, alrighty. Okay, so the second part, what we want to talk about is in terms of DAO diligence, right? So a lot of people talk about DAOs. There's a lot of interest in DAOs, but then if you look at the number of people who are voting, and then are the people who are voting also the same type of people who are using the product, I think you see that it's actually not super correlated. Meaning, if you want to start a DAO, or if you want to get into a DAO, or you're a member of a DAO and you're thinking about, okay, how should I design my vote, or how should I design my snapshots? What you see is that low correlation between number of voters and trading share of wallet. Essentially, people who are voting for this DAO and who are voting on the governance aren't really as users. So if you want to create a DAO, that might be an interesting way to think about it, which is if you're going to airdrop, or you're going to whitelist, or you're going to vote on something, maybe you need somebody who is actually using your product to vote on it. as opposed to somebody who goes out, takes a flash loan, buy lots of token, does a snapshot, votes in a snapshot to change something for you, right? So this is an interesting way where, so this is kind of like not exactly Sybil attacks, but basically setting a barrier maybe like here, where you say, okay, only people who are using my product or my protocol should vote on it. And if we're talking about something like an attack from a competitor, right? They could get a wallet, they could fund that wallet with some ETH, they make a flash loan, and then they can more or less calculate how many votes they need to affect governance, right? So these are all maybe a little bit early for some of the projects here, but I think these are actually very important things to think about when we are thinking about how do we vote, because a lot of the voting is essentially anonymous and permissionless. So the way you can better protect yourself against these attacks is important. And then, yeah, so voter participation increased, but number of holders is flat. So what does that mean? It probably just means somebody is manipulating it. Yeah, this is what I was talking about, which is, these are your users. These are the people that are generating value, and these are the people in your community, right? And this is the number of people that's affecting your things like your gauge payout, or whether or not you want to stake your next maybe vault, right? Whether or not you want to support a token. So obviously, this is the problem we're trying to highlight, especially for you as developers, or as someone who's trying to run a project. You want to avoid this asymmetry between people who, because we all want to be more open, we all want to have more people to participate, but what you see is actually the actual number of participants and your actual users are actually extremely, extremely different, right? And that creates maybe good outcomes, maybe bad outcomes. It's hard to tell. However, I think as a project or as a founder, you should be aware of it at least, so that if something does happen, the way you design and vote, you can kind of protect yourself or minimize yourself from the negative externalities. Okay, so now we talk about a little bit about preferences and segmentation. And then, so I'll say this, prior to coming to Web3, I used to be a product manager at Google Analytics. So segmentation, user segmentation is actually one of my favorite things, because once you figure out who your users are, then you can better target them, and you can figure out, if you're building a single product for all your users, or if it's better if you just have two products, one for each segment, right? So, so here you can see that. So one of the, I didn't find the tweet. I used to saw a tweet where it basically said the number of NFT users and the number of DeFi users, those are completely two separate populations. And so this might explain why NFT never took off, just because people who are buying NFT, they're in it for the community, they're in it for the people, they're not in it for the returns, or they're not in it for the DeFi returns, right? Whereas if you are building and this is not to encourage anybody to not do NFT, right? This is just merely to say, when you look at this and you say like, oh, I have so many blue chip NFT traders, and then I launched a product that is a borrower lending platform. However, most of my users has never made a DEX trade. Then that's a very difficult process, right? So what that means is you may have to design your product differently to appeal to these people that never made a DEX trade. Maybe you need to position your messaging, maybe you need to position your product differently so that they don't see it as a DEX trade. Maybe they see it as a way to, I don't know, make better use of their NFT or something. But yeah, so that's the point where if you're designing a protocol, and this is not necessarily you're designing a protocol, right? because the data is public, you can actually look at your competitors, right? If you're doing an NFT project, you can look at Ben DAO, and you can say, oh, interesting. So Ben DAO is like this. Then what should I do? Maybe instead of doing NFT and getting NFT users to adopt DeFi or NFTFi, maybe I should go the reverse, right? Maybe I should go find people who are experts in DEX trading or experts in AMM, and then find people who are also, maybe they're holding a lot of, perhaps not blue chip NFTs, but other types of NFTs, and get those people to use my product, right? So the whole point here is instead of us thinking about it in kind of a linear fashion, we can think of it from the reverse, right? If I am a call it NFTFi product, I'm looking for people who make high frequent trades. So let me go find those sets of users first, and then give them something to trade, instead of finding someone who's never traded and then asking them to trade, right? This is just trying to think about the way you do user growth and you do user acquisition from a different perspective. Yeah, so that's on the right side. This is the thing. So yeah, so I think this is actually, this insight from Alberto is actually very correct, right? Which is blue chip NFT holders, they have an interest, but I don't think necessarily borrow lending is the right part, because maybe this is the part where they can look at what other protocols they've used, right? And so the reason why I say this is it's great because all this data is actually available on chain, right? You don't have to use Nansen, even though I'm from Nansen. You don't have to use Nansen to any of this. You can use any competitor product, including building your own product, just to see what users are like, right? So. Yeah, so this is another one which I thought was extremely interesting, which is how do we calculate, or how do we assess contagion, right? Contagion, this is the interesting part where we can see that we looked, or Alberto, not me, looked at the top NFT traders, right? And then what we saw was that most of them deposit their money into FTX. Right, so then if you're thinking about launching a collection and you're trying to think about, oh, what do I think about these users, whether or not they have money, just the fact that, oh, they might be, so this is just an observation, right? A lot of them are in FTX. Now, what you do to these users actually depends on you, right? So if you can say like, okay, I have a theory that these users, perhaps they're hurt by FTX, well, maybe I can give them an airdrop, right? So this is another way of trying to think about how do you do user acquisition based on something you know about the user, right? And then also, there's also a lot of, how do I say it? If someone is a Gemini or Coinbase user, they're more likely to be in the Western hemisphere. And someone who are in Binance, more likely to be in the other parts of the world. So you can actually do a little bit of a geographic analysis for your user, just based on whether or not they've deposited to an exchange. There are also other things you could do, like you look at their activity by hour and see which hour they're least active. And statistically, you're least active around 4 a.m. I don't know if that's true for you guys, but I think when we looked at it, it was least active by 4 a.m. because a lot of people, they're either asleep by then, but they might still be up at 3 a.m., but 4 a.m., they're definitely asleep. So by that, you can also kind of index in their least active hour is their time zone, and then by which time zone they're in, you know which part of the world they're in, right? So is that interesting? It might be. You might discover a lot of your users are in like, EMEA or in other zones. So you may say, hey, maybe I should time my AMAs or time my activities in those time zones to be more friendly, right? So, small things like that. Does it matter in the long run? Maybe, but I think it's kind of nice from a user perspective. So at least I don't have to stay up until 1 a.m. trying to catch that like mint, right? It is a little annoying. Yeah. Alrighty. Okay. So this is I'm coming actually close to the end of the presentation because a lot of it is very data driven. as this is a data-driven BD. What does that mean? What does that mean? So I know a lot of our customers, more the institutional customers, are, for example, people who are trying to get people to stake their ETH, right? So what they're doing is they're going on chain and they're looking for people who have lots of ETH but is not staked, or they're looking for people who have lots of ETH who, if they can get them over to work on it, will really look really good as a customer, right? So on the left side, you can see that, I don't know who founder number 1 is, but apparently founder number 1 throws some CRV into Fraxlend, right? And what that means as a protocol is, this person probably sufficiently legitimate that is lending a lot of credibility to your platform. And the good thing about it is even if you may not know who this person is, but at least you can generate a list of interesting and useful addresses that then your BD organization can go and then BD these people and say, hey, why don't you come onto our platform, right? And this is kind of a way of getting some credibility to your platform, even if you don't know who these people are, right? And then there's various different products now. You can think on Etherscan, you can actually message people using their addresses to get them over. And then so this one is, the screenshot is not fully there, but this is, on the BD side, someone from Frax Finance getting some early, this is like a big Ethereum miner, and then they put their money into Frax Finance to basically, I think, to generate Frax, the stable coin. So this is kind of the things that is not, it's not very sexy. It's not about consensus. It's not about Web3. This is like very basic bread and butter of, your product is ready. You've had a public launch. How do you get your product from, 1 to 10 or 10 to 100, right? Because I think 0 to 1, it could be faith-based. It could be kind of testing the market. But then once you think you have some users, how do you attract the next wave of users? And some of these are kind of data-driven techniques to help you find what might be good and attractive customers that can help you bootstrap your next set of customers. All right, and then I'll skip the next parts about Nansen. We're just a analytics company. We take data from blockchains and then we process it. Okay, that's it actually. So now I'm happy to answer any questions.
Surely. So I would like to ask the first question because I think it is a little bit relevant to this. There's some relevant context. So here, can you help us define what a user is in this sense? The reason is that because addresses are anonymous, so how do you dedupe several addresses belonging potentially to the same person?
Okay, excellent question. So this will be a very technical answer, unfortunately, which is in terms of what your end application is, you don't actually need to dedupe all the addresses that belong to the same person. So I'll give you an example of doing an airdrop, right? Because that's the example where we, often people will farm for airdrops and they'll create multiple addresses. So from a data-driven approach, the problem you're trying to solve isn't necessarily that these sets of addresses belongs to one particular person. The problem is a much easier problem to just say this address is very likely to be a alternative address, and then you just exclude that from your airdrop. Does that make sense? Kind of what I'm trying to say here? And 我可以用中文解释也可以。就是这个地址和一个人的直接关系不是我们需要解决的问题，我们需要解决的问题是这个地址它有可能是一个备用的地址，然后我们直接把这个地址扔出去就可以了 ，right? Like because from a mathematical perspective, this is like what the technical part. It's much harder to say these sets of addresses belong to the same person, right? The chance of you being right is virtually like half. However, the chance of you saying this address is likely to be an alt address is extremely high, because all addresses, you look at the distribution of addresses, how many tokens they hold, what is their average transaction time, average transaction volume, all addresses show up very, very high. So in terms of airdrop, just throw out those alt addresses, and then just drop to users who actually look like users. And don't worry about the fact that these 10, 20 belongs to one person, 100 person, 200 person, right? Because that's not important. Sorry, very technical.
Hi. Oh, hi. Actually, I have a follow-up question on that because I was wondering how you would define activity that makes it seem like they're human or like that it's not an alt address, because there are users that are obviously don't use crypto as much. Does that not make it seem like that would be an alt address?
Excellent question. So this actually goes back to the design. Sorry, and then I was just telling her my background is economics. So this actually goes back to the design of your token airdrop, right? Whether or not your token airdrop is designed to drop to actual users. So if we go back to this slide here, is our where is this? Is our airdrop targeting towards actual users or actual voters, right? What I think is the best practice is your airdrop should be airdrop to people who make impact and contribution to your ecosystem, right? So they do 1 transaction, 100 transactions, 10,000 transactions. If from your business perspective, that transaction doesn't really matter, then what you should do is in terms of your airdrop, you should just all count that as 1. Does that make sense? I guess let me try to explain it in another way, which is say you're a business, right? And you think the most important part is I want people to bring in, say you're an AMM and you want to bring people who opens new pools, right? So you may have 1 address that opens 1 new pool, and you have 1 address that opens up 10,000 pools. There's nothing to say that you can't just drop to those 2 people just 1 token each, instead of 1 token and then 10,000 token, right? So what you should really do is you should set up your criteria of here's my selection criteria for what the airdrop is, and then you should have a weight, right? And that weight should be, should I multiply that by the TBL? Should I multiply that by the time which they were active? Should I multiply that by how long they've been active, right? Whether they're first or last or duration. Should I multiply that by the number of frequency of transactions? Like those are all airdrop designs that you could design. There's nothing to say that that just because someone makes 1 transaction that they're less important than someone who makes 10,000 transactions. Same thing for TBL, right? It's not necessarily that the person who commits 10 million to your pool is less important than someone who commits 1 million or $1, right? So I think that's the part where I'm trying to get everyone here to think about is what is really good for your ecosystem and what is really good for your growth, and reward those users instead of just doing a mass airdrop. And I know it's a lot of work because I do some of this study, and you have to write a lot of SQL, you have to do a lot of counterfactual analysis, you have to do a lot of like modeling and designing to do it. But I think in the long run, we are in a kind of a lower cycle, so I think we have time to do this and design airdrops correctly. Okay, any questions? Okay, well, thank you so much. And yeah, everyone, good luck building.